Well, hello, friends, and welcome to the Healthy Christian Leader. I am Dwight Habermel, and I have my guest, Father James Mallon.
Great to be here.
It's fantastic to have you here. We've been having an amazing conversation about criticism and how to deal with it in a healthy way. And our previous podcast was all about that. And if you haven't listened to that, you need to go back. It's so valuable, so helpful. And I want to take this conversation into more of a proactive way of dealing with leadership in the life of the church, in how we can actually lead the church in a positive way to actually not necessarily minimize criticism, but help reduce what is unhealthy criticism or what is the more reactionary type of criticism. We'll never make it go away.
You'll never make it go away. And if it ever completely goes away, then you're doing something wrong.
Right.
I remember there was a lady a couple of churches ago. She was this wonderful, she had the charism of encouragement. This beautiful lady, and she would always say, "Oh, Father James, you're wonderful and everyone loves you." And I'd say, "Jeannie, I hope that's not true." And she'd say, "What do you mean?" I said, "That's what Jesus said about false prophets." So, I mean, I got to have some people that don't like me, So if no one is criticizing us, then there's something wrong. So, but yeah, there are things we can do to minimize. I've often said to our team at Divine Renovation, because we meet some pastors who are totally on fire for the vision and totally convinced about mission and are just, ready to go and do it. And it's slow down. It's any idiot can go and split a church and kill a church by trying to go in the right direction. I mean, where they're trying to take the church is the right direction. What they're trying to do is the right thing, but how they do it is the wrong way because they don't take people with them. They don't they don't adequately convince people of the destination, or which is a question of vision, or they don't convict people of the why. I mean, you've got to do that. So I remember talking to pastors. I was just overseas just last week talking to a group of pastors and saying that really for the first year, one of the main things you can do in the first year if you're in a new church and you want to try to lead this kind of change is you've got to preach vision. In some way, if not a pure visioning sermon, we say homily in our tradition, but at least you preach the meta-narrative. Mm-hmm. Sometimes in preaching we preach the micro-narratives of these particular sets of scriptures, but by the meta-narrative I mean, what's it all about? What's the purpose of the church? Why do we exist? Why are we here? Where are we going? Where should we be going? Mm-hmm. What do we need to change? Where are we going to end up if we keep on going where we're going? Like lifting people's eyes out of the details of ministry and work and and looking up and looking out and asking some of these big questions and then to speak about, where is God calling us to be as a church? Where are we called to go? Because the church as a living, dynamic entity, organism, living body, is moving. Mm-hmm. It's even moving one direction or the other. And it's either moving towards life or towards death, towards health, spiritual richness, or spiritual poverty. So which way is it? And we've got to be careful of the extremes because they're in the history of the church. You can see different movements at different times that have put greater emphasis on the spiritual and greater emphasis on the human. Mm-hmm. As if there's even some movements, organizations in church today who you would think that, all you need is proper leadership strategies and to be equipped in a particular way and you can move a church in a particular direction, which most believers know that's not true. There's the Spirit of God is the primary animator of the church. But sometimes there can be a movement in the church, which actually in 17th century Spain was called Quietism. And it was a spirituality that says basically just God will do everything. We don't really have to do anything because it's God's church and God's in charge and God will do everything. We don't have to do anything. But St. Augustine famously said, pray as if everything depends on God and work as if everything depends on us, because it does. It's that mystery of the human and divine. It's fully human, fully divine. Jesus is fully human and fully divine. The work of grace is fully divine. Now, I might get into trouble with some particular traditions in Christianity, but the Catholic position is that the work of grace is fully divine and fully human. There's the mystery of free will as well.
Right.
So it's the human and the divine working together, and so the same dynamic is there in the life of the church, and so that human understanding meeting the spiritual. Again, we talked in the previous conversation about the importance of prayer and spiritual coverage and spiritual warfare, but there's that human dimension, and that's the art of leadership. And there's so much literature available, so much wonderful information available about leadership. And in some circles, in church circles, people say, "Oh, we don't. That's a bunch of BS, business stuff."
Yeah.
And so, but I think it's some of it can be from the business world, but actually, the business world has taken a lot of stuff from the Gospels, because Jesus models incredible leadership principles.
Yeah.
So one of the things we can do is how do we prepare the way for change, for transformation? How do we minimize the chance of pushback that will come from misunderstanding or not properly taking the time to win people over? Because here's the thing: if you try to convince people to own a journey before they've owned the destination, they're going to kill you. Mm-hmm. Like some church leaders try to do that. They throw something out on vision and think that that's enough, and then they try to get people to actually own, to actively implement moving in that direction when you haven't convinced them of the direction, and it's not going to work. Like, slow down, because transformation, especially if a church, takes time. You're a builder in your other trade, Dwight. You know this.
That's right.
Our ministry is called Divine Renovation. Mm-hmm. We often get confused with being a building company sometimes. There's actually a company in the States that are a building company called Divine Renovations, plural. So,
if we look at rebranding the company, well, then maybe that's a good idea.
But so renovation means renovare in Latin, means to make new again, which is very biblical. Jesus says in the book of Revelation, "Behold, I make all things new." That's more difficult than just leaving and starting something new. Mm-hmm. That can be a valid calling, but to make new again is a kind of a more organic reality, I think. And the thing about renovations, whether spiritual, ecclesial, or physical, is that they're going to be they're going to cost you more than you think.
Yeah.
And they take longer than you think.
Yes.
Right.
And there's a demolition process and then a rebuilding process.
And the taking longer is something that people in their passion and excitement often forget. Yeah. And that can be a cause of needless pushback and conflict, that you don't take the time necessary. And secondly, the cost. And part of that cost is the pushback that you're going to receive that's built into the program. So what are some things? I think adequately getting people on board with the vision, really selling the destination. And so for instance, if you're in a kind of an inward focused church and you're trying to talk about mission and the call to mission, that it's not so much that the Church of Jesus Christ has a mission as the mission of Jesus Christ as a church. The primary vocation of the church is evangelization. A lot of people, especially if you're in an unhealthy church, they might not be interested in that. So it's a matter of preaching. Like, I really believe that weekend preaching is the biggest tool a pastor has to prepare the way for change and to minimize this kind of pushback. Because again, this is a spiritual reality. We're asking for kind of an anointed preaching to touch minds and hearts, to set hearts on fire for a particular direction. And there's two main things that we have to do, and I say this to pastors, it's not enough to teach and preach about something. In that first phase of renewal, you've got to let people experience it. So for instance, what we say often, what you can do in the first year or two, the first year anyway, of trying to bring transformation to your church is preach and teach on mission, and then do something like Alpha and let people experience it. Let people see people coming to Jesus and being filled with the Holy Spirit and becoming active members of the church and being able to speak about what the Lord has done for them, and let other people experience it themselves. So here's a scriptural thing. If you look at the Old Testament, there's the Shema, and Hear, O Israel, from Exodus. It's proclamation, it's teaching. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. We know that this was like the Jewish creed. It's such a central text, but it's proclamation. Listen up. I'm going to tell you who God is and what you must do. You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. But then there's another scripture from the Psalms that says, taste and see that the Lord is good. Well, that's different. That's not, hey, listen up, I'm going to tell you what you have to do. It's, hey, come over here and try this donut. Like taste and see. And it's both. You need to hear the proclamation, but you're not going to win people over until they get to bite in and taste.
So then once you start to establish that sense of vision, where we're going and how we're going, how do you articulate that and be sure that it's heard and understood?
Yes. Hey, I remember reading the first time about vision, and it was like, oh, that's what it is. I didn't know there was a word for it. I just knew that when I first met you, when I was in Herring Cove, I mean, I'd drive down the streets and walk down the streets, and my imagination would be like just exploding about what could be. Like I'd almost see it, and I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know it was. Then I read a book and they were talking about vision. I was like, oh, that's what that is. And I think the first thing is that's got to burn bright in the heart of a leader. You've got to really be on that, which means take that to prayer. Even write it down can be really, really helpful, and allow it to stoke your passion, because you're going to need that supernatural passion, that zeal to be burning bright, so you can get through all the difficult times. So vision. See, the mistake I made early on, especially at St. Benedict and other places, was, I cast vision and win people over, and then 6 months later, people would say, "Why are we doing this again?"
Yeah.
Father James, you don't talk about the vision. I was like, "What are you talking about? I talked about that 6 months ago. Talked about that. I gave a homily on that a year ago. What are you talking about?"
Yeah. It's like vision leaks.
Vision leaks, exactly. Yeah. You've got to talk about vision again and again and again and again, not just in your preaching, talking to your staff, talking to your key leaders, talking to your ministry leaders. For instance, one of the things we do in our church that I started doing in my last church, we have it actually tomorrow morning, we do a leadership summit where we call together the key leadership. At my church right now, we got about 60 to 80 people will come. Leaders of ministries, they're the person who they're mentoring, different the leadership teams, and we have a morning of prayer, dialogue, fellowship, visioning. We dig into vision and leadership, and we have them every 3-4 months. And I think you've got to invest in that. You've got to constantly go back to vision all the time.
Well, one of the things that I've thought about often, I pastored for a number of years, and then the Lord called me into more regional ministry, and to fund that, and it was business, and God's blessed that business, and we've been able to grow and learn. But reflecting from this platform to the previous platform, I begin to realize, I got a lot going on in my head every day. And then I come to the church, and then I have to regather my thoughts, not about Jesus, I'm talking about where our church is going and what God is doing, and there has to be a keeper of the vision, because I can't necessarily always keep that vision every day. I'm responsible for keeping a vision here. And so, when you talk about, needing vision leaks and repeating the vision and recommunicating, it's not necessarily that people are dumb. It's that people are very, very busy and they carry a big plate. And in the pastoral ministry, we have the privilege of thinking about it regularly. We tend to eat, sleep, drink, talk, everything about that vision. But when the people that are part of the team are busy 40, 50 hours a week in other things and then have family and everything else, that has to be re-educated, reinforced, because it leaks.
Yeah, that's right. And it's human nature, isn't it? We get caught up in the details. We basically stop seeing the forest we lose the capacity to see the forest from the trees. And we need to stand up straight and lift up our heads and look around to make sure, are we still headed in the right direction here? Mm-hmm. Because we can go off course. We've all experienced that on a physical journey, how we can drift and go off course. And so it's important for church leaders to not just work in their churches, but to work on their churches. And part of that is to ask the question about vision, because vision is essentially about destination. Mm-hmm. Are we going in the right direction? There are other, once you've got that vision, which you've got to, there's never a time in the life of church where you can take your foot off the pedal of vision. Doesn't matter what phase you are in renewal, vision has always got to be put out there. And it's that God-given picture of the future. It's people say, well, that's a very, it's a business thing. No, it's deeply spiritual. Mm-hmm. Like your vision statement might be written out in a boardroom, but it's worked out in a prayer room.
Right.
So
right.
It is deeply spiritual. But in the implementation of that vision, then you've got to come up with, use the fancy word strategy, which just means plan. Is it interesting word though, because the word strategos in Greek means soldier. It's to do with a battlefield. It's a reminder of that spiritual reality. But the strategy is simply the plan. And as you begin to roll into the different aspects of the plan, here's another way: take the time, have it at least a 6-month lead of when you're going to introduce major changes, and preach it, teach
right.
it, lean into the why.
So you're managing expectations.
Yeah, so often the churches, it's like, people say what's going to change, when it's going to change, mm-hmm. or what's going to happen and where it's going to happen and when it's going to happen. Not why. Mm-hmm. Talk about the why.
Yeah, we're creatures of habit.
Yeah.
And when you interrupt that, it's all that needs to be provided is preparation. That when you start to prepare and manage those expectations, that, okay, I can expect something is going to change, it makes it so much easier.
Yeah. So I'd say that all matters in investing in your leadership team. That's part of what we do. So in gathering the key leaders at something like a leadership summit for your local church, you're giving them an advanced look at what's coming down and giving them the why and giving a chance for them to give you feedback to maximize the chance of buy-in, so that they leave that gathering and breathe life and hope. Hope, this is so important. Hope is against a spirit of cynicism that can be really destructive in a church. That has a bubble up effect from those in leadership. That's an immense help. Now, even doing all of these things and doing them well, it's not going to change the fact that there will be opposition. I'll just, I know our time's coming to an end, but I want to share one other very hopeful model of change that can be very helpful for church leaders. And the insight is from something that probably is familiar to many listeners, and it's the Rogers Innovation Adoption Curve. So it's a curve, it's a bell curve, and it shows how typically any population responds to innovation, so change. and it breaks it into the different categories. And the leading edge are 2.5% of people who are innovators. They will see a problem that has no apparent solution, and they'll try stuff. Now, 3 out of 4 things may fail, but that doesn't deter them. They're going to press forward, and once in a while, they'll find something that works. 2.5% of people are that kind of person. The next group is 13.5% of people, and these are the early adopters. So these are people who are watching, and as soon as they're not ready to innovate themselves, they're not going to try something new themselves, but they're going to watch the people that are doing new stuff, and if it doesn't immediately blow up, they're going to jump on board. So that group together is approximately 16%, and these are the change agents in any organization. They're people who see that there are issues with perhaps the present reality, things can be better, and they're ready to do something. And that 16%, the good news is that 16% are your most important group. The next group are what's called the early majority, and they are roughly about 34% of people. Now, they're not against what's happening, but they're much more circumspect. They're much more cautious. So for instance, if the 2.5% are the people who camp out overnight on the street to get the iPhone, the next group, the early adopters, get the iPhone in the first week or two. But the 34%, they're going to wait 6 months. They're going to wait for the updates and all the kinks to be worked out in the hardware and the software, the operating system, before they buy in. And after that, the next group is called the late majority, another 34%.
Right.
And the final group are called the laggards,
Right.
16%. And what happens is as the front 16% lead change, the early majority will slowly get on board, and they'll bring the late majority with them. The laggards will never get on board, doesn't matter what. Like, they're still doing dial-up. They still have rotary phones, and they're the ones who will generally make the most noise when an organization begins to change. They're the ones who will write letters to the pastor, to the leadership team, to the bishop, to your district supervisor, to saying what a terrible job the leader is doing and such. And they also represent 2,000 other people. They can be disproportionately noisy, and in so many organizations, because of if you think about it, that's 16%. So say you have 1,000 people in your church. Well, let's say 500 people. You get 500 church members. That means you get 80 letters of complaint. Now, what's the most, for the pastors out there listening, say you preach a particular sermon or something happens, what's the highest number of complaint emails or letters or phone calls you've ever received? 4 or 5, 6, 7? This model says that if you received 80, that's actually, that's about right on. That's right on. That's only 16%.
Yeah.
But what we do is we put more attention onto that. I remember years ago, one time at St. Benedict, I came in on the Monday morning, and
that's a very helpful piece of
well,
information.
the deacon, I remember, said, "Oh, Father James, we received a lot of complaints about this weekend about what you did." I can't remember what I did. A lot of complaints. And I said, "Well, how many?" He said, "Well, a lot of complaints." I said, "How many?" "Well, a lot." 4 people. We had like 1,500 people at Mass and 4 complaints. That's brilliant. But we receive anything. It sounds, these kind of feedback sounds so loud. Now, again, I'm not dismissing the fact that these complaints ought to be discerned, as we talked about in the last podcast. But when it comes to dealing with organizational change and feeling when they come in waves, how that feels, it can be overwhelming to us, and can often, sometimes leadership teams will say, "Oh, maybe we better put this on hold. Maybe we better not push ahead with this." But what happens is, what you've done is you've given leadership to the people who shout the loudest in your organization. And I tell you, when leaders do that, the front 16% who have the capacity and anointing and the motivation to lead change will get frustrated. And the more that you as a leader give attention to the complainers and the laggards, the neutral people in the middle we'll actually start moving in the wrong direction. So that model can be really helpful in helping us to understand that sometimes what feels like a lot of people complaining is within the realm of the normal.
For the leader, and we've got just a moment left, for the leader who's just dawned on them that, hey, maybe the criticism I'm experiencing connects to the way that I've prepared people or processed that information, where can they go to grow?
Yeah, I think number one, if you really have, the job of a leader is to build teams around him or herself, and the best teams are the people who are better than you and smarter than you, and there are people right next to you who have insight, who are going to be able to help you grow. If you invite them to speak into your life, you will be surprised how people will help you grow. We need to have accountability in that for sure. There are all kinds of books out there. Put
Are there a few that
in the
you
Christian
appreciate?
world? Check out Divine Renovation's website. We've got on our YouTube channel. We've got all kinds of webinars and talks and like from leaders from all over the world. There's a lot of incredible things there.
Yes.
And
that's something that both Protestants and Catholics.
Yeah, when we get down to that level of
are going to benefit from.
Yeah, what I've discovered is, I mean, when you get down to saying, okay, we want to be churches that are making disciples, forming, equipping, and sending disciples, then despite our differences in ecclesiology and understanding of sacraments and such, there's not much difference, because human beings are human beings at that point.
Right.
And the Spirit of God is the Spirit of God.
That's right. Yeah. And Jesus is Lord in the journey of
one Lord,
your
one
life.
faith, one baptism. We talked about Ephesians 4 last time, I think. And yeah.
And that's been our amazing fellowship together for 25 years now. Anyways, Father James Mallon, fantastic conversation today. And dealing with criticisms is where we started, and we talked about leadership in the church so that we can pave the way for more healthy and less pain moving forward. But the reality is we're going to experience pain.
Yep.
Fantastic. I hope we can get you back again.
Sure, anytime.
All right, and we'll see you next time on The Healthy Christian Leader.
Well, thanks for joining this conversation. I trust that you were encouraged and challenged by the stories and experiences that were shared today. Would you join us next week? You can find new episodes weekly in video form on the Aaron Ministries YouTube page and in audio form wherever you get your podcasts. Aaron Ministries is an interdenominational network of friends in ministry with a mission to foster healthy Christian leadership. Check out our website, aaronministries.com, for more information and resources, and on how you can donate to our ministry and potentially start a healthy Christian leader gathering in your area. Until we meet again, may you experience the Lord's blessing, grace, and peace. I'll see you next week.